Welcome to Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Today, friends, we have another exciting guest on our podcast, and this time it's someone from another country. So we're going to get an international perspective on matters today. So we're talking with an individual named Darren Stevens. So welcome to the podcast, Darren.
Thank you.
If we could get started by you kindly giving us an introduction to yourself, a brief biographical sketch.
Oh, okay. Well, my name is Darren Stevens. I'm a university lecturer. I have a PhD in psychology and cognitive complexity, and it's how we think that's important to me. Um, I literally live in the middle of the UK in a place called Northamptonshire. Um, Wife, kids, all of the trimmings, that kind of thing. My life's over, basically, mortgage. Um, and I enjoy reading about psychology, how we think, and it's this kind of idea that when we read about the UK politics, it always leaves me a little cold because there's no real thinking going on in our politics at the moment.
Oh, so is the United States politics better if we're thinking?
Not really, no. I'm probably going to talk a little bit about levels of thinking, if you're okay with that.
Sure,
By all means, ask any questions you want. I'll answer them as honestly as I can.
sure. So we in I'm the type of American that I like some stuff we do and I like some stuff we don't do. I believe that's the best way to be. And I also view other countries the same way. So I
Yeah.
like some things that other countries are doing well and things they're not doing well. We can learn from each other, I believe. So what do you think is the biggest flaws and the biggest benefits of our political system in the United States from your perspective?
I think it's the same problem we have, and it's this duality, as if there's only two things we can vote for. And let's just make it simple, a left and a right. And in reality, most people you talk to on a daily basis are right down the middle. This is at least in the UK, they're pretty much down the middle. And what we tend to find is when push comes to shove, most people share the same kinds of political values.
Oh,
But
sure.
we have to then start to label them as left and right. In the UK, conservative right and Labour left, that kind of idea. I mean, you guys, you Republicans, you Democrats.
Yes.
It's when you start to put those kinds of labels on them that the problems begin.
Oh, okay.
So if you said to me, Darren, do you think? Oh, by the way, as a scientist type of thinker, I always go with the research. I pretty much always go with the research. So if you said to me, do you have any perspective on transgender? Well, yes, and my perspective is the science. It's all to do with the SRY gene and whether it attaches itself to the Y chromosome and the X chromosome. There's about five or six different sexes in humans. My opinion on whether someone is male or female on based on what they look like is meaningless. I'd go with the
Sure.
science every time. It's why biology professors don't get their students to do a sex test on in the first year of their biology studies. It's because what they look like might not be what they are on the inside. But you
Sure.
can't tell this to people. They're not really interested in science, in the truth of how the research works. What they're interested in is hearing the political parties say the words that they think coming out of the political people's mouths. So, they're going to pick people who think like they do. Now, obviously, from my perspective, I think there's a bit of cynicism in that. In American politics, you've got a lot of religion, you've got a lot of
Yep.
um, left-right prejudice. You've got, I mean, we just look at the division in your country right now with regards to Donald Trump getting in again. Now,
Yep.
from an external perspective, I put $10 on the fact that he would get in when everybody
Oh,
was telling me, he will never get in. He'll never get in. Of course, he won't get in. We're a much more progressive country than that. We're going to vote for the person who's not Donald Trump. Well, I'll come back to that because we had the same problem in the UK. And
oh,
the current Labour Party won the election not because they had the best policies, not because they were the most appropriate for the role. They really aren't. They're killing the country right now. But they were a protest vote. It was basically, we want to get the Tories out rather than we want to get Labour in. That
okay.
makes sense. See the direction of intention. It's different, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
So that's the kind of political thinking that America had a year ago. They were thinking more about let's put this person of color, this woman, whatever you want to say, let's put this person in just to keep Trump out. And it's the wrong thinking.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh,
So,
definitely. That's the type of thing we run into all the time with alternative parties is people are saying that you have to choose the lesser of two evils, and we don't want to do that. Our candidates hate that. They have to run against that because they want to do something positive, and like some call it, we don't want to always play defense. We want to play offense.
so, so if you think about it like this, right? Let's bring some levels in. And I don't know, Andrew, I don't know if you prefer Andrew, Andy, whatever you prefer.
Andrew's
Um,
fine.
thank you. I don't know what your education level is. I don't know what your political bent is. I don't know anything about you at all, right? But one thing we never ask about is people's values and how cognitively complex they are as thinkers. Now, my research is in complexity, self-awareness, that kind of thing, because people think they're self-aware, but they're really not. Okay.
Huh.
Um, and if you look at Americans like Robert Keegan, who's a developmental psychologist like me, and another guy called Otto Lasky, you get to see that they have these levels of development, level two, three, four, and five. I'm using my hands like everybody can see me. I know they can't. All right. So level two is very self. It's all about me, 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 me. What's in it for me? How much money can I make for me now? Level two, right? Level three is a bit more socialized in their thinking. So how are we doing? It's a family party. This is all about us. Maybe you're a nurse, maybe you're a teacher, socialized mind, level three.
Sure.
When you move through that into level four thinking, which is called self-authored by Robert Keegan, you know that
Self
people
what?
have self-authored. So you're writing your own script, Andrew. You're writing your own script. You're thinking for yourself, in essence, right? Now, as I say these things, level two is selfish, me, what's in it for me. Level four is it's about self, but it's about self with an understanding and an awareness of other. Okay, level five is again other, but it's the greatest other. Everybody benefits. It's people wanting to like colonize Mars, that kind of nonsense. I'm not saying Musk, I'm just saying it's those kind of lofty
Sure.
ideas. But when you think about American society, um, there's a guy called Hofstadter who did a lot of work on culture, and you have things like power balance, and risk aware aversion and things like this. Now, when you look at America and you look at people like Donald Trump, he is phenomenally level two. He's what's in it for me now? How much money can I make for me now? He can't even put himself into the shoes of other people to feel what they might feel, which is what a level three person could do. They can feel other people's pain if they need to, if they want. Sometimes they do it when they don't want to, they just feel it. So it's a very
I get it.
external locus of evaluation, whereas Donald Trump has a very internal locus of evaluation.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Right? Now, if you think about American society, would you say, being an American, would you say that American society is level two, a bit more selfish, individualist, or would you say it's
Yeah.
level three, a bit more family oriented, egalitarian?
I would say as a whole, it'd be more what you call level two
Yes,
because
sir.
we are known for our individualism.
Yes, sir. I agree. And then think about your politics. Basically, the American public has elected their level two king. That's it. That's all they've
Yeah.
done. They recognize the societal impact of level two thinking, me, selfish, wasn't it for me? And don't get me wrong, sometimes being selfish isn't necessarily a bad thing, but that depends on whether you can choose not to. Can you choose to give, $5 to the beggar on the street? Can you choose to put yourself in someone else's shoes? If you can, that's completely different. If you can choose to be selfish, that's completely different to someone who is not capable of choosing, right? Trump is not capable of choosing. He is how he is. Okay. So for me, the American politics is essentially a level two society, individualist, a little bit selfish, and Donald
Okay.
Trump is the epitome of that culture, of
Oh
that level.
my.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So here's a question about that. So in order for him to get elected, he has to offer things to other people. So some people would say you can't be 100% narcissistic because eventually if you're hurting other people, they may hurt you back. Or if you want to get something from other people, you have to give something to them. So he has to appeal to people. He has to give somebody something. So how is he managing to do that if he is so someone that's entirely self-centered, they wouldn't be able to run for office because they wouldn't get anywhere. They wouldn't be able to offer anything to anybody. He's offering something to somebody.
He's where's he getting to? He's getting to the highest level chair in the entire world potentially, but at least in
Yeah.
your country, he's
Yep.
gaining ultimate power. He wants the power. What's in it for me? Power. What's in it for me? Money. What's in it for me? Prestige, status, control. Okay. Now, he's got a team around him. He will have advisors. In your experience of the last presidency, how often did he listen to his advisors? How often? Let me change the question, Andrew. How often did he go off script?
Too often. All the time.
Exactly. He does not listen to others. He's not doing the level three thing. He's doing the level two thing. It's all about me. Whatever I think is correct, it's an internal locus of evaluation, right? Now, from my perspective, the UK is with the current system we have now with Keir Starmer in position. By the way, I don't really care for titles like Sir. I don't think he earned it. I think it's anachronistic. It doesn't belong in 2025. I'm not really a fan of the royal family.
Oh,
That kind
okay.
of that kind of idea. I know they
Sure.
bring in lots and lots of money for tourism, but doesn't it make you wonder why in a time where everybody's getting cancelled for all kinds of different things, when we're talking about eat the rich and make the rich poor, how do we still have a royal family? I don't understand.
Oh, good
But
point.
anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. But so in the UK now with Keir Starmer and his socialist ideas, we're going the other way. We're going too far.
Oh,
So
okay.
completely the opposite way. Now, the point I'm getting to is that when you start having policies that are taking money off everybody, because let's face it, the middle class in the UK is the easiest target. They're the ones with a bit of cash. You're not going to target the very, very rich, even though they're about to start trying to do that. But with the UK and the US has an extreme level two perspective, and the UK is starting to have an extreme level three perspective. So what?
Oh,
So what, in your perspective, do you think will be the next step? What's the best way to be rather than extreme two or extreme three? Surely we need to move into level four thinking, which is a self-authored perspective, right? And that, for me, is when you start to look at the northern European countries.
oh, wow.
So you look at Sweden, Norway, Finland, those kinds of places, maybe even Switzerland. Okay. It kind of, their kind of culture and their philosophy kind of transcends and includes modern and postmodern ideas, I suppose, and emphasizing integrating multiple perspectives while aspiring, I guess, for personal and societal development. So when you're looking, I mean, I'm going to guess, Andrew, forgive me, but I'm going to guess that you're a Star Trek fan.
I'm not.
Oh my goodness. In Star Trek Next Generation, they have a scene where Captain Picard talks to some people who were cryogenically frozen in the 21st century and they're reanimated, whatever, in the 24th century. And they're obviously they're saying, what happened to my stock options? Oh my God, I think I've still got that library book, you know? And Captain Picard has to explain to these three people from the 21st century that actually we don't have money anymore. It's not about money, it's about personal development. It's about expanding your horizons, about increasing your thinking capacity, that kind of idea where everybody benefits. So we move away from a level two American society. We move away from a level three socialized or socialist society. And obviously you can pick your other countries like China, India, Russia for a much more family-based, socialized, socialist environment. Okay, but we need to move through all of that and get into a much better frame of mind and a much higher level thinking capacity and
Okay.
say, I mean, why do we have to have inflation? Why do we need to increase costs? Because at some point, someone is trying to keep as much money as possible for themselves,
Sure.
right? And then when your president says things like he's going to put tariffs on Chinese products, Mexican products. It doesn't actually matter which products, as long as they're imported. Well, who pays the ultimate cost for those tariffs? Is it the Chinese company? No, because the Chinese company will sell you a product for $1,000 and there's a 10% tariff on it, which means that the customer has to pay $1,100 for an imported product. The Chinese company still gets their money. The
Yeah, good
government,
point.
yeah, the government gets the 10%. The American public stop buying it, allegedly, stop buying the product because it's too expensive. And then the idea is that the Chinese company won't sell as many. It never works that way. All that happens is that the American public loses another $100 to the tax system. So it's always a
Wow.
tax on the individual. It's never a tax on the companies. Yeah. So
Wow.
what would be a better idea? How do we focus on developing a system that is fair, which isn't a really, I mean, fair is a peculiar word. Nothing is, if life were fair, I'd be much taller and much more handsome, but I'm not, So how do we make a system that benefits everybody,
Yeah, good point.
you know?
In college class, in philosophy class, that's what I studied for one of my majors in college. There was a theory they introduced us to that is a thought experiment. If you were going to create a society where you had to be the lowest person on the totem pole in society, how would you design society? So that answering that question is a way to make it fair for everybody because you don't know how you're going to be in that society. If you're going to design it where the people in the top benefit and you're not on the top, then it's going to be a bad society for you. But if you're going to make a society where everyone, including the people at the very bottom, have the best conditions possible, then you're going to want to live in that society.
I think one of the things you have to take into account is they did try something in Sweden. I'm just, now you were talking, I've forgotten the word for it, but it's a system where the government gives you money, and I will remember it every month. You don't have to work, the government will give you the money, right? They tried it and it didn't work because people didn't buy into the idea from a totem pole perspective. You have to take into account the fact that there will be people there who are driven and want to research, and they will develop technology, rockets, whatever you want for the good of mankind. But you have to have balance. You also have to accept there are people who are going to do nothing.
Yes.
And that's it. If you can accept that the spectrum of activity from somebody who couldn't care less, they're still entitled to their $1,500 a month, to somebody who wants to make the world a better place, also getting $1,500 a month. When we can accept that entire paradigm and spectrum of thinking and behaving, that's when your totem pole will work.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily for economics. It's more along lines of oppression. Like you wouldn't want to be a second class citizen. You wouldn't want to have less rights if you were on the bottom, right?
Oh, I
So it's not
see.
only, yeah,
Yeah, no, from that perspective, in a system where the government is helping you every month, everybody is equal in that sense.
yeah,
It's only the thinking around it that makes it less equal. So people, I mean, what is the thing that divides us really, Andrew? It's not actually skin color. It's not actually sex, gender. It's perception of class and class. Okay,
oh wow,
so for example, a poor white trash in America from a class perspective is exactly the same as a poor black person. What's
interesting.
that? Yeah. So what really divides us is perception of class. So somebody with lots and lots of money won't look at a black person and a white person as black and white. They'll just look at them as poor. And it's the same in the UK. And it's the same most around the world. You will not give a person who looks and appears to be poor the same time of day as somebody who appears to have class. That's it.
Yeah,
In India, they have a class hierarchy where they have 5 levels, and the
yeah,
lowest class is the servant of the highest class. Still going on today. And it's also a genetic experiment where the women in the higher, it's called the caste system, if you
yeah,
didn't know, but it's the caste with an E in the end, caste system. And the highest caste, which are the Patels and people like that, they actually only, well, it's kind of changing now, to be fair. But up to about the year 2000, they only bred with other people in the same caste as them. Well,
Okay.
this created a genetic experiment. So they knew that the women in the higher caste were allergic to a specific anesthetic. So when they had a baby, if the doctors gave this woman these in the higher caste this one anesthetic, it would kill them. So they had to ask which caste you in, and the entire system was basically a genetic experiment with Indian men and women. But now it's kind of blending a little bit more. They're not doing it as much anymore. But so if you
Okay.
think about if you think about America, if you think about the UK and Europe, it is the perception of class that divides us. So how do you get over with your totem pole? How do you then get over the idea of class rather than equality and rights and things?
That would be a tough one. So Marxists would say that you need to overthrow the capitalist system, but I don't think you're going in that direction, are you?
No, because I think the again with Marxism, it doesn't work necessarily because there's always someone at the top in their palace, you know. But the idea is that with it's not so okay. Let me give it to you in a different way from a with using my research. I can tell you specifically how a nurse thinks, or how a doctor thinks, or how an engineer, an accountant, a psychologist, whatever. There is an optimum way of thinking for these types of people. So, Andrew, I don't know, what do you do for a living, Andrew?
I'm a small business owner and I tutor English and do freelance stuff.
Right. So, do you tutor English because of how you think, or do you think that way because you tutor English?
That's a great question.
Right.
I
So, what do you think the answer is for you?
Part of it was because I study languages myself, so I knew about tutoring, and that was one thing I realized I could do.
Good.
So I
So, let me give it to you a different way then, because my wife is an accountant. Is my wife an accountant because of how she thinks, or does she think that way because she's an accountant?
Probably the first one because
Good man.
you
That's exactly it.
you have to have a certain way to think in order to get in the profession. Like I don't have an engineering mind, so I'm not going to be an engineer.
Good. That's perfect. So now let me tell you this. If we know from the age of about 16 that someone is always going to be lovely and caring and wanting to help others, and we know that they're going to be a nurse, we also then know that they're never going to earn a lot of money in the UK because nurses aren't paid a lot of money in the UK.
Yep,
Um, I,
here too.
you know what I mean? If we know ahead of time that they're not really going to earn lots of money, how could we help them? How could the government help them? How could we help their future? Because they'll always be, by definition, poorer.
Yeah.
And it's got nothing to do with their job. It's got to do with how they think.
Huh.
Yeah. So we know the types of people who are going to make it big. We know the types of people who are not going to be, they're going to be working in charities. They're going to volunteer their time. They're not actually bothered. They don't care about money. Well, when you look at, when you understand how people think, you can make allowances for whatever it is they're going to do, and that is the what's the word I'm looking for? I'm going to say the equalizer without bringing up images of Edward Woodward, but I don't know how old you are, Denzel Washington.
There you
Um,
go.
it's it's understanding how people construct their thinking is the equalizer that will balance out your totem pole. Because we know if you get that totem pole and you put it on its side instead of pointing up, then how they think will determine where they sit on the totem pole. Put it on its side, we take into account how they think and we compensate for the people who are never going to earn lots of money. They're never going to be millionaires. They're never going to be ambitious. The blah, blah, blah. Understanding how they construct their thinking is the balancing act for the outcome of the society where everybody is equal. And it's kind of like a golf handicap where the person who is most capable has a low handicap, like 2, but the person who is least capable has a high handicap, like 36. It's that kind of
Okay.
idea, but it's based on our thinking.
So is this like self-help stuff where they talk about having an abundance mentality where people who are rich think in different ways than people who are poor because they see more opportunities for money and they
So,
they all say they attract it to themselves.
so the seeing more opportunities is a good one. Using constructed development theory, it's about dot joining. How many dots can you join? Now, the people who are good at joining dots are capable of seeing more dots. So, of course, they can join them. People who can't see the dots, and this is about complexity. So, at the lower levels, they don't have as many, they can't see the dots to join, but that's not their fault. I see lots and lots of dots. As a university lecturer, it's literally my job to join the dots on behalf of the student and help them to see what they can't see. Does that make sense?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So, but we don't penalize a student for not being able to see the dots. Now, sort of, I give them a low grade if they don't do a very good job in their assignments, but literally writing an assignment for university is about joining as many dots as you can so that you do all the thinking for me, the lecturer. So if I have to start joining dots while I'm reading your work, you're not going to get as high a grade as somebody who's joined all the dots for me. Now, that from a societal perspective, if we know that somebody is capable of joining lots and lots of dots, we let them get on with it. We give them the same money as the person who's a nurse who only joins specific dots for helping, caring, that kind of thing. And
Oh,
and by joining those dots with them, we now have the totem pole on its side rather than pointing up. There is no one at the top, there is no one at the bottom. We're compensating for the thinking, not for the political party, not for the money they make. Going back to the Star Trek thing, we're all in it for our own development. We're not in it to make as much money as possible. Now, if we could get rid of the idea of profit, shareholders, in the UK, we have energy companies like water, electricity, and they have shareholders. And the water companies here have leaky pipes. But instead of fixing the leaky pipes with the money that they make, they give it to the shareholders and then charge the customer more. Well, if you've got a pensioner who's 70 years of age and not on very much money because of their pension, they can't afford their water bill, but the shareholder gets all the money. Now, there are some aspects of um, business and some aspects of, why can't I think of the word, Andrew? Capitalism. I got there in the end. There are
there
some
you go.
aspects of capitalism that aren't useful. And there are certain things that should not have profits attached to them. Education is
Oh,
one of them. Yeah. Education, energy, transport, these kinds of things that everybody benefits from. So we're going to the level four thinking now, Andrew, where everybody benefits. It should be free. It should be free at the point of contact. National Health Service. Don't get me wrong, the National Health Service in the UK, everybody talks about it. It needs raising to the ground and starting again. It's got a lot of waste. It's got a lot of middle management who don't know what they're doing. It needs completely overhauling, really. But the idea is that everybody benefits from the system. Get rid of the profit people. Get rid of the ones who charge just because. Do you know the story? And I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, but do you know the story of Elon Musk when he went to NASA and said, "How much does it cost to build a rocket?"
no, I didn't hear that one, unfortunately.
So he said to the NASA, I'd like to start SpaceX. I want to build a rocket. How much does it cost to build a rocket? And they said it's about $200 million per rocket. And he went, what the bloody hell? He says, I'll do it myself. So he went out and he went to every single supplier that NASA uses. Guess how much it was?
A
It was about,
million?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. It was about $2 or $3 million. The reason why it was 200 million is because as soon as the supplier saw the word NASA on the invoice, they added a zero.
Oh
That
my.
is greed. Yeah, that is greed. That is corruption. That's
Because they
not
could.
necessary.
They could pay for it. They would pay for it no matter what, huh?
I know, right? It's government money, but in essence, Andrew, it's your taxes, mate. It's your taxes that's paying for that. So what Musk did was he knocked it all on the head. So of course now NASA use Musk and Jeff Bezos because the straight away their rockets are a hundredth of the price that they were paying. But that's the kind of we need that kind of thinking. What's the best way for everybody to benefit? We start to look at their thinking. We start to look at get rid of the ideas of greed around things that should be for everybody's benefit. You know, I mean, I've been talking a long time. We've got about 6 minutes left on the clock. We can always start again, but I'll happily shut up for a minute.
Okay, so since our nations are so different, why do you think our political systems are both similar in the sense that we have few choices? versus maybe other European countries.
That's right. And in the Northern European countries, in the UK, we have this thing called first past the post, and it's a terrible system. It means that it means that 30% of the population can go out to vote for Labour, and only just over 50% of that 30% will vote, and then Labour will get in. Whereas in places like Sweden and Finland and Norway, they have proportional representation, which means
Yes.
that however many people are voted for each party, that's how many get in. What tends to happen is you get a much more well, the system over there is you get more balance in the politics, which in the UK would be I've forgotten the name of it again, Andrew. What do they
We
call
call
it?
it a two-party system.
Say again?
Two-party system or duopoly,
Yes, no, I don't mean that. I mean when more than one party is voted in, it's
like a
called.
coalition
Thank you.
government.
That's the word I was looking for. Coalition. It escaped me. So you tend to get more coalitions when you have the proportional representation. But I think that's a fairer system. If
Sure,
we,
yeah.
I'll give you a quick example. If there's a guy here called Nigel Farage, and he in the last election he only got one member of Parliament, despite having more votes than the Scottish National Party in total. And the Scottish National Party had 51 members of Parliament. If we had proportional representation, I forgot the name of the party that Farage had at the time, UK, whatever it was, Reform, whatever. They would have had about 50 MPs and they got
Wow.
one because of the system. That's not a good representation, regardless of whether you agree with the politics or not. Okay, in fact, the whole point about the politics is to have people you disagree with. That's why you need more than one party in any place. You need a
Yeah,
balance of power. You need a balance of thinking. Somebody who leans to the left needs to be countered by somebody who leans to the right. But that doesn't
sure.
mean you need, but there's a propensity in the UK at the moment in the media and in Parliament to call things far right, when in reality, it's just a standard perspective. It's not far right at all. But the left
Oh,
like to label things as far right. Okay. But you never hear the words far left, mainly because I
huh.
don't know what that, I don't even know what that looks like. Maybe a guy called Jeremy Corbyn, far left, but Keir Starmer as well, Diane Abbott, people like this who studied communism, even Angela Merkel in Germany, literally studied communism and then gave birth to the Christian Nationalist Party in Germany, and it had very, very left-wing policies. But what you're finding now is that the left-wing policies that they introduced are being countered by the German public. They no longer want people coming in from foreign countries, taking over certain areas of Germany. They don't want to dilute their culture. They don't want to dilute their politics. And it's all being countered now. So all of the things we saw in the last 15, 20 years, people are suddenly realizing actually it's not working. And that's the kind of advice I would give to people who are voting for Donald Trump. You're going to get a very one-sided perspective on everything, and it doesn't
Yeah,
work. It won't work,
yeah, yeah. Good point. Yeah,
you know. I've spoken a lot, Andrew. Have you got any thoughts?
yeah. This is good stuff. It's deep thinking about these matters, and I think it's important to realize that some people would say that ultimately autocrats will self-destruct. Some people say history leads that to that conclusion. So, do you think Donald Trump is going to self-destruct?
No question. I think I think so. Do you know, one of the things is, I mean, don't forget, right? It's a double-edged sword. I will answer that question. But when he talks to people in the Middle East and he knows that they're being not very forthright, and he thinks that he wants to control them. All he has to say to the president of Iran is, if you know the phrase FAFO, if he says to them, look, I'm going to say it straight. If you mess about, I have a much bigger gun than you, and I will blow you off the planet. And because that is the only language that they understand in a tribal feudal system, it worked. This was the last time he was in power. It worked. He literally said to him, and said to the people over there, he said, look, you guys can do whatever you want, but if you piss me off, I'm going to blow you off the planet. And that threat was the level 2 threat, as in thinking level. It was a level two threat to a level two president of a country that is tribal, insular, internally motivated, and so on and so forth. So you kind of have this balance of power across the world where Trump is so single-minded and focused on his own, status that he will tell other people, "I'm just going to blow you off the planet if you annoy me." So in some instances it works, but as a country and a culture, it's not going to benefit the system. It's not going to benefit the people in the long run. There's no developmentally inclusive politics where they're tailored for different levels of thinking, moral development, that kind of idea. We've got less than a minute, Andrew. What would you like to do?
How can our audience support you?
My party is called the Non-Partisan Party, and it's not really a real party yet. It needs a bit more funding before it gets moving.
Okay. And where can they go to see that and help it?
tnpp.org.uk.
tnpp.org.uk.
Correct.
Great. Well, thank you for your time today. We appreciate your perspective and thinking about these matters in a
Thank,
different way we talked about before.
thank you for having me.
We wish you all the best.
You too, sir.